I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll discuss Senator Jon Husted's push for voter ID, Vivek Ramaswamy's plan to cut property taxes, the outcome of the FirstEnergy trial, and an effort to reverse Ohio's ban on THC drinks. Back with me today is Jesse Balmer.
Happy to be here.
Let's start with the FirstEnergy trial. As a reminder, two former executives, Chuck Jones and Michael Dowling, were accused of bribing a public utility official. This is part of the House Bill 6 scandal that sent two Ohio Republicans to prison. But the jury in this case couldn't reach a verdict. What do we know about their deliberations?
Yeah, so just tremendous reporting from our colleagues in Akron about this. Patrick spoke with the jury forewoman who explained that the majority of the jury was interested in convicting Jones and Dowling, but they got a little caught up. There were at least a couple people who, were concerned about the bribery charge in particular, I think became a point of contention. The case really centered around this $4.3 million that was paid by the FirstEnergy folks to Sam Randazzo, the former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. And that money was kind of changed hands before Randazzo was appointed by Mike DeWine to that role. And so the timeline of things, I think, got a little complicated for folks.
Yeah, this case, the whole House Bill 6 saga has always been really complicated because utility policy is very complicated, and it's a world that I don't think most Ohioans are exposed to on the average day-to-day. I think another wrinkle in this case was the fact that Randazzo is dead. He died by suicide a couple years ago, and so the defense was able to kind of scapegoat him, and, there were a lot of questions about his part in this that could not be answered.
Completely. And I think when you contrast this with a federal case that was brought against the former House Speaker Larry Householder and others, that they had a couple of co-defendants take the stand. So you had like a lobbyist and a political consultant who were in the room able to explain, like, here was our thought process behind this particular pay-to-play scheme. Versus this, you really have a lot of documents and, just a little bit less easy to flesh out. I thought one of the quotes that from the forewoman was interesting. Some of the jurors felt like they were taking Calculus 200 without taking the basic course. And yeah.
That seems right. What happens from here?
So Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost has said that he wants to retry this case. Defense attorneys obviously feel like this should be acquitted, that the state was not able to make their case. So the judge is looking at dates to reschedule this. This was a pretty lengthy trial. It was about 6 weeks. And so not a small use of taxpayer resources to retry these two individuals again. Another thing that's interesting is there were also federal charges brought against Jones and Dowling, which have not gone to trial yet. I don't think a trial date has even been set yet. So it will be interesting to see how those two kind of different tracks impact one another.
Yeah, I wonder if the federal prosecutors are looking at this now and, maybe not wondering if they have a case necessarily, but maybe wondering if there's value in taking it to trial when their last trial out of this for, former House Speaker Larry Householder and former Ohio GOP Chair Matt Borges, that was not a short ordeal either.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting what happens there. It's the federal charges were filed really just days before President Donald Trump took office. And so that was under the past administration, a different U.S. attorney for the Southern District. So we'll see what happens there.
Our next topic is voter ID. Senator Jon Husted is championing a national requirement for photo ID at the polls. The policy is part of the Save America Act, which would also require voters to prove citizenship when they register. Ohio already does photo ID for voting, and it's one of the strictest laws in the country. But the SAVE Act is controversial because it would nationalize these policies, and it's interesting that Husted has put himself at the center of this debate.
Yeah, in some regards, it makes sense. Husted used to serve as the Ohio Secretary of State, which is a person who oversees the election, doesn't commit diplomacy with Indiana. I think the title is kind of confusing. But so in that role, he overseed Ohio's elections, and your reporting showed Ohio didn't have a voter ID requirement, a photo ID requirement at the time. And in fact, when people proposed this bill, Husted was opposed to it at the time.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. I just kind of stumbled upon it in old Columbus Dispatch clips, and he argued at the time that he didn't think it would solve the voter fraud concerns that he had. At the time he was Secretary of State, voter fraud was rare as it is now. His office pointed to, about 800 cases or so over the course of his 8 years as Secretary of State, but he just wasn't convinced photo ID was the solution. Now, fast forward to today, he does support Ohio's photo ID law that was enacted in 2023 and has said at the federal level, speaking on the Senate floor, that you need a photo ID to board a plane and do all this other stuff. And so it shouldn't be a big deal to require it to vote. And from there, let's pivot to property taxes. Vivek Ramaswamy, the likely GOP nominee for governor, finally rolled out his plan to cut property taxes. Kind of. We at least know that he doesn't want to eliminate them, which is what he said at the beginning of his campaign. Jesse, what did we learn?
Yeah, so Ramaswamy has a new ad out about lowering property taxes, and he talked about wanting to roll them back to before the end of the pandemic, which, depending on when you define the end of pandemic, is maybe 2021, maybe 2023. That would be cuts of billions of dollars, depending on when you actually set that parameter. But it would not be eliminating property taxes entirely, which is something that a group is trying to put on the November ballot, or as soon as they can ballot, to get rid of those types of taxes.
And Ramaswamy met with those advocates, which was interesting to see. They've been collecting signatures for this for probably about a year now, and we're hoping Ramaswamy would be an ally in this endeavor, but guess not.
Yeah, I think this has been a really hard political issue because I think everyone recognizes that voters would like to pay less money in property taxes, that property tax relief is something that people are really fired up about. But also there's the reality that if you eliminated property taxes entirely, you'd have challenges funding schools, firefighters, police. And if you want to be the pro-police, pro-cops candidate, it's hard to cut firefighters and law enforcement's key source of funding. And so it is just it's a political hot potato right now. It's hard to propose a policy that's going to make everyone happy.
Right. And Ramaswamy, I think, avoided that pickle by not providing many details about how exactly he would cut property taxes to pre-pandemic levels. He alluded to a couple different things, talked about school spending, and then said something about, wanting local governments to be more judicious. But reading between the lines there, can we glean anything from that?
Yeah, I think he said he wanted local governments to be able to continue, but kind of tighten their belts, for lack of a better term. And I think you see that from Republicans across the board. So we'll see what that would look like practically. I think until we see actual dollars and cents, it's hard to know what impact this would actually have on communities. I did want to note that his likely opponent in the November election, Dr. Amy Acton, hasn't exactly rolled out a robust property tax proposal either. She's talked about a tax cut for working families with property tax relief, but not exactly sure what that rate would look like. Has talked about the homestead tax exemption, which benefits lower income seniors and people with disabilities. It's something that lawmakers have talked about, but that's not really across the board relief. That's targeted to certain individuals.
Yeah, if we've learned anything from this property tax saga, it's that the details can get muddied pretty quickly.
Yeah, and there's just so many people invested. Obviously, so many homeowners that are, feeling the pinch of these taxes, but also so many local communities that need the money to run and are wary of kind of outsourcing this to the state if they had to rely on them for money.
Yeah, for sure. We will end today with Ohio's new ban on hemp products and THC drinks. Senate Bill 56 took effect in March after multiple lawsuits and a ballot campaign failed to stop it. But businesses that sold these products are not done fighting quite yet. The biggest effort underway is a push to get lawmakers to override Governor Mike DeWine's veto, which eliminated a grace period for drink sales. What have lawmakers said about this?
Yeah, so I think it's less likely to happen, in part because overriding any veto is just really a challenge. You have to get to a higher number. You have to get to 60 in the House and 20 in the Senate. And while these THC drinks are popular and the lawmakers were very much interested in having a carve out for them in the initial bill, trying to go back and overcome that giant hump could be a little challenging.
Yeah, and I talked to a couple lawmakers who said part of the problem is in both the House and Senate, you have legislators that aren't big on any of these products, whether it's marijuana, hemp, THC drinks, whatever. They don't like any of it. They kind of begrudgingly accepted the stuff about the drinks and the bill because they wanted to ban hemp gummies and things like that. But I think when presented with just the override and actively trying to bring these drinks back, you're probably not going to get folks like that on board.
Yeah, I think even legislative leaders, I know Matt Huffman is, not pumped that there's marijuana sales in the state in general. And so, spending the time whipping the votes, counting the numbers in order to do something that maybe is not intrinsically in his wheelhouse anyway would be surprising. But I understand the interest from business owners who are, having to cut costs or lay off employees because they no longer are able to sell these products in Ohio. So obviously a lot of interest.
Yeah. And one more thing before you go. We have a primary coming up, so it's time to make sure you're registered to vote. You can check that at voteohio.gov. If you're not registered and want to vote in the primary, you have until 9 p.m. on April 6th. Early voting starts Tuesday, April 7th.